Welcome back to On the Ball, everyone. This is the new video series from the Vanderbilt Sports and Society Initiative. Really excited to have our new Vanderbilt women's volleyball coach, Anders Nelson, with us today. Anders, thank you for taking some time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Andrew. And I'm really excited to be here and really excited to do the interview.
Yeah, man. Well, the first question I want to ask you about your name, I'm from Madison, Wisconsin. And if I were to ask to come up with what's the most Wisconsin name that you can think of to come up with, Anders Nelson would probably be at the top of the list, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I didn't know my name was as unique. I'll use unique instead of weird as it is until I left kind of my little bubble of northern Wisconsin. I'm from a tiny town in northern Wisconsin, and I knew other Anders. And we actually had a guy in my high school named Hans Hansen. So that one might actually trump my name for most Wisconsin, most Scandinavian name out there.
That's terrific. So you're from St. Croix Falls, is that right?
Yeah, a tiny town of 2,000 people. It's about an hour northeast of Minneapolis, but one stoplight. Big deal when we got a Subway and a McDonald's, and yeah, it's one of those small towns. But lucky to be raised there for sure.
Yeah, and I'm almost afraid to ask you, are you a Vikings fan or a Packers fan?
So I grew up a Vikings fan. I've never been a Packers fan. But about 5 years ago, I got a little frustrated with the Vikings franchise. And my husband is from Cincinnati, and his family's been season ticket holders for 35, 40 years. And so I started going to a bunch of games with them, and this was pre-Joe Burrow, so I can at least say that. And I was like, fine, I'll be a Bengals fan. I get to go to the games. This is better. And then they drafted Burrow, Chase, and now it's obviously I look like a bandwagon fan,
Right.
but very large Bengals fan now.
Okay. Yeah. How about Brewers? Or are you
How about
twins?
Brewers? No, I'm all twins. All twins.
Twins. Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah.
that'll be the end of our interview then today.
I know I'm a trader. I'm all Minnesota sports almost exclusively.
Yeah, I know that part of Wisconsin for sure. So Paul Molitor is somebody that maybe we have in common. He was my favorite player growing up but from Minneapolis and Twins manager.
Yeah, I love Paul.
Yeah. No, the other day when you were at the Vanderbilt Kentucky game, and of course coming to Vanderbilt from Kentucky, but you mentioned to me that you were a big Jerry Stackhouse fan, going back to your youth. Tell us about that. You said you were a Stackhouse stan, right?
Yeah, I don't know why. I just loved his game. I loved his energy. I loved his athleticism. So I remember watching him in North Carolina. I wasn't a huge Tar Heel fan. I'm still not, but just remembered and then followed him closely through the NBA and really enjoyed his time with Pistons, Mavericks. So yeah, I was definitely on my interview or the first day of work when I got to meet him. That was a special moment for little Anders, for sure. And I sent that picture of us shaking hands to a couple of my high school friends, and they thought it was pretty cool too.
Oh, that's awesome. And you're taller than him, right?
Yeah, barely, but yeah, he dresses nicer though.
He dresses nicer than anyone, no doubt. All right, so you came to Vandy after 11 years at as assistant at Kentucky, including 7 as the associate head coach there. Tremendous success, the first SEC school to win a national championship in women's volleyball. So obviously part of a elite program. And Vanderbilt starting or restarting its program. It existed for a couple years in the late 70s, but really, starting from scratch here. And I assume that, given the success you were a part of at Kentucky, you've probably had other offers or that you've been thinking about making your move to become a head coach. What was it about starting a new program that was especially appealing to you?
Yeah, that's a great question, and obviously one that I've thought about a lot over the last few years, and especially the last year. But I think for years in our program at Kentucky, we had talked about what a great opportunity it would be for the SEC to add volleyball at Vanderbilt. And one of the goals our staff had at Kentucky through the decade that I was there, we obviously had a lot of inter program goals, but one of the goals we had as a whole was to make the SEC the best conference in the country for volleyball. And it's shown that I can do it in a lot of different female sports, and we wanted volleyball to be next, and I still feel that way. And on that, we all decided as a staff, for the SEC to be the best conference in the country, Vanderbilt has to be good. There's just a lot of things that Vanderbilt can offer a student athlete that nowhere else can, especially within the SEC. Revolving around academics, revolving around the city of Nashville, which is just incredible. So those things are kind of obvious of why I was attracted to this job. And I will be honest, when they announced it in April, I looked at Mark and I said, "Hey, I want that job." So it was something right away that I knew I wanted. I felt like it fit me really well as a person. But then when I got further into the process and got to meet some of the people during the interview process, specifically Candace, just the attitude they had towards who they wanted to lead the program and who they wanted it to be was somebody I thought that was personable, could recruit for sure. Obviously, that's what we're gonna just be spending the most of the next couple years doing. But also just had this inner desire and inner drive to compete and build. And that's something that I've realized at Kentucky was my main motivating factor in terms of program success was how do we make this program better than it was last year? How do we make this program better tomorrow than it is today? And that's what really drives me as a coach. And when I got to Kentucky, they were in a really good position to grow. But throughout my 11 years at Kentucky, we did a lot of, take this step, take this step, take this step, take this step. And that's what got me to go to work every day. And that's what made me excited to go to work every day. So this is a totally new challenge and a totally new endeavor. And Kentucky, started here and now we're starting here. But already the challenge has made me, I don't think I've stopped smiling in the last month, just because I'm so excited about what we're building here. The staff I have in place already shares that passion. And it's a really easy place to get invested in quickly once you meet the people here.
Yeah, and so real quick, like you've been hired as the coach, but the team won't step on the court and play the first games until when?
Fall of 2025 will be our first official season. So yeah, we'll hopefully bring in some athletes next year that will train in redshirt. And honestly, through my conversations so far, I've been really impressed with the level of athlete and the level of character that we're attracting so far. And these kids understand that going to Vanderbilt for 5 years is a really unique opportunity, and starting a program from scratch like this is a really unique opportunity. And they're really excited about it.
That's awesome. And going back to what you said early in that answer is that even when you were at Kentucky, like your staff there was talking about what it would require for the SEC to be the best conference in women's volleyball, and it needed Vanderbilt to be good. Like that was something you actually were saying there.
Absolutely. And I think we were a little bit jealous that we got to watch all these other sports get to go to Nashville for like a, one game a year, and we didn't get to do that. So we were jealous on that, first of all. But yeah, we just knew like what it is. And Vanderbilt has that prestige and that reputation no matter where you are in the country. And that's one of the unique parts of this recruiting process too, is we can draw from everywhere. And we've had interest from every single state almost already. And that's a pretty unique situation and speaks to the, again, just reputation of Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm. How do you pace yourself? When you've got obviously a lot to do. Do you feel like you have a lot of time to get it done? Do you feel like, man, like you have a million things to do and not enough time to accomplish it? Like, how do you feel about this 2-year like ramp up stage?
Yeah, that's been the biggest challenge for me so far, is prioritizing of what is most important right now. And I could never leave work right now and I'd be busy. So making sure that I turn it off at night is important to me and important to my husband, obviously. But yeah, those are conscious decisions I'm having to make right now is, okay, you're going to stop at this time, because I could just work. And there's enough to do right now to just keep going. So yeah, honestly, the trickiest part right now is just prioritizing what is most important today. What's the most important over the next couple months. But there's also a sense of we have a lot of time to do things right. And that's what I've kind of emphasized to our staff so far, is I want to be really conscious about putting good processes in place. So when we get to 2025, some of our daily tasks are really routine and really easy to complete.
I heard when you came in for your interview that you had like notebooks with a plan in place already, and that really showed you'd put a lot of thought into this. Can you share a little bit about that vision that you had already developed, or the plan that you presented as what you would do if you landed this job?
I'm a huge planner. I like being prepared. I hate being unprepared. So to a fault sometimes, a little bit. So that's something I'm working on. But yeah, I came in with a plan, and I understand that might change, and it probably already has changed. But I think in a situation like this, you have to show your vision, because it can go so many different routes, and there's so many different paths you can take. So I wanted to make sure that they knew that I was very serious about getting started right away. That I'm a person who's not afraid to ask for help or ask for advice. And I've already reached out to several coaches that have been in similar situations across other sports. that have started programs, and kind of in a Power Five level, just to show that I'm willing to ask for help and look around the country for people that could maybe provide some advice. So that's kind of one of the first things I wanted to do, is make sure that I reached out to those that I respect in our community, but also in other communities. But then just kind of also articulating what kind of style of play that I want us to, show when we take the floor in 2025. And I knew that a lot of people around here are very excited about volleyball, but might not have the strongest background in volleyball. So I wanted to make sure that they understood that I'm very serious about the style of play we're going to have. And I understand what it takes to get to the top of the SEC. And that's where I want people to be thinking about this program. In 5 to 10 years, we want to be at the top of the SEC, and we want to be pushing for Final Fours.
Fantastic. What's the style of play that you value, that you love to coach, that you want to bring to Vanderbilt?
Gritty for sure. And at Kentucky, we always had gritty teams that played hard every single point. Teams that play really hard for each other. The best teams I've ever coached celebrated harder for their teammates than they did for themselves. And then I would just say high technical abilities. We want to play clean and we want to play fast. And these are all things that I've adapted from Kentucky, and that had brought us a lot of success. But there are other programs around the country that I really admire, and Louisville, Purdue, Nebraska are kind of programs that play similarly to Kentucky. And that's how I want to play here at Vanderbilt as well.
What's involved in that education aspect? You mentioned that this is a department that hasn't had volleyball. Vanderbilt fans in other sports may or may not be familiar with volleyball. They may have kids that have played, but they haven't necessarily watched at this level. Like when I watch elite college volleyball, I mean, it's amazing to see the crowds and the enthusiasm. I think this is something that's going to be really special and a jolt of fresh energy for the Vanderbilt fan base. But what goes along with that education, getting people excited and turning out to create that atmosphere here?
Thankfully, Nashville is an area that has tons of volleyball players, and I believe volleyball is the second most popular high school sport here in Tennessee. So there is some baseline exposure to it. Like you said, at this level, maybe not as much, but there is really good volleyball across the state. In a lot of different areas, a lot of different cities. So yeah, we're already talking as a staff of how we want to do some chalk talks, or how we want to try to introduce some pretty basic just volleyball kind of strategies to our fans. And obviously we got to get some things in place before we do that. But like this weekend, I'm going to be at the National Girls and Women in Sports Day. I think we're doing a little kind of expo over in the practice gym. We're going to bring a couple volleyballs, and hopefully we'll have some kids that want to learn how to pass and set with my assistant and I. But little stuff like that, and taking opportunities to educate when we can. And I'm a person who, if you go to lunch with me, I'll probably have sugar packets and the salt and pepper shakers moving around, trying to explain volleyball. That's how I like to teach. And I love being in those situations. And at Kentucky, we actually had a booster club where we did chalk talks occasionally. And that was one of my favorite things I got to do with them, was just that teaching aspect. And that's why you coach, is to teach. And this is just kind of another way that we get to teach.
Speaking of that, I was so impressed when the announcement was made here and on Twitter. You could tell how much your former players at Kentucky, how much you had meant to them, not just as athletes, but really it seemed like as people, probably more so. Can you talk about that aspect of why you enjoy coaching, and the what is important to you in building relationships with your players?
I think one thing that maybe non-athletic department people don't realize is that we meet these kids when they're 14 or 15 years old. We start recruiting them at a really young age, especially in volleyball. We start to get to know them better and better through the process. And by the time they get to college, you already know them really well. You know their families well. So I think that in itself is that I'm a part of these athletes, 8-year career, starting from high school through college. I believe that was one of the most special and transformative times for me as a person and an athlete. And what really, really motivates me is the opportunity to get to be a small piece in their athletic careers. And I grew up in a family where sports was everything. And we were competing on everything. We had some pretty nasty card game nights once in a while. My sister and I, at couple summers, we weren't even allowed to play one-on-one basketball against each other because it just got too nasty. But point being is that we hold your athletic career, that college athletic career, very sacredly almost. And it's only, a very short time of your life. You only get to do it once. So to get to be a part of that is just super special to me. And it also drives me to make it the best experience possible for those athletes. And leaving Kentucky, the hardest thing was leaving those athletes. And I knew it would be hard no matter what it was or what year it was. But obviously, I have some very close bonds there and bonds that will last for the rest of our lives.
Speaking of bonds with your sister, she was a great volleyball player. It sounds like you guys played basketball together, but when did you become really interested in volleyball? How important was she in your development as a volleyball player yourself?
Yeah, I wouldn't be here if she hadn't decided to go play volleyball at a pretty serious level. And she kind of, my family's not a volleyball family. We're a much bigger basketball family growing up. And my parents still, they'll hate me for saying this, but they still don't really know the rules. And they've been watching it very closely for the last 25 years. But yeah, she decided to kind of take a jump and go play at a really high level club one summer or one off season. And I didn't know anything about it then, and my parents didn't know anything about it then. And we went to these tournaments, and how club volleyball tournaments work is you walk into these convention centers and there's 100+ courts. So it's just these massive arenas with just volleyballs in your view just everywhere. And I remember the first time I walked in and I was like, whoa, this is a world I didn't know existed. She started being heavily recruited right away. It was kind of a diamond in the rough. So it was a really unique recruiting situation. And my family involved me really heavily in that. So I got to go on visits with her. I went to Wisconsin, I went to Minnesota on visits with her. And as a little brother, my parents compared me to the little brother in Blindside, SJ. I was her recruiting manager, I guess you could say. And I was filing all her stuff in the mail and stuff. So I knew in middle school, because of my experiences with her, that I wanted to be a volleyball coach, and that I wanted to recruit high level athletes like she was.
And then your own college career, you started at Minnesota, you transferred to Ball State. I'm sure that experience of having gone to two schools, transferring, you must have seen some things you liked and didn't like, right? At Minnesota, if you transfer, so that gives you an understanding maybe of the type of culture you'd like to build also. Is that fair to say?
Sort of. So at Minnesota, they don't have a Division I men's team. So I was there and I was on the men's club team because I had never played competitive volleyball before. So that group I got to play with was really great, because all of us were on the club team and really choosing to be there. We didn't get paid to do anything. We didn't get any scholarships. We traveled in, passenger vans, and it was not luxurious at all. So everyone on those teams really wanted to be there and really wanted to play volleyball. So I played a ton those first 2 years. Just by happenstance, I got lucky and got seen by the Ball State coaches. And so I transferred to Ball State primarily to be on their Division I team. And I also knew how many college volleyball coaches in the women's realm had gone to Ball State. So I knew it would provide me a really good network, including Craig Skinner, the head coach at Kentucky, who I worked for the last 11 years and is definitely my biggest mentor. So those were kind of the reasons I went there. But I did get to see two vastly different colleges, going from Minnesota, a huge Big Ten school in the middle of a city, to Ball State, which is in Muncie, Indiana, a smaller town, and a MAC school. So it was really fun that I got to see two different kind of just ideas of campus. And now here at Vanderbilt, it's another very unique situation. So just getting to see all the different facets of college athletics.
And of course, there's an aspect to your story. Also, you're starting a new program here. But you've mentioned your husband several times in the interview, and you're one of the few out male coaches in Power 5 sports. Is that something that comes with certain obligations, responsibilities, extra pressures? Like, how do you view that aspect of your career?
That's a great question. It's something that, and I'm not proud of this, but it's something I kind of ran from early in my career. I didn't really embrace it, and I was really nervous that it would affect my career development and even career performance in terms of recruiting. And then as you grow and get more comfortable with yourself and get more confident in your abilities in your profession, that just kind of faded away. And I understood all of a sudden, just through younger coaches that would come up to me and say, hey, like, it means a lot to me that you're out and that you're who you are. And I remember a couple of role models that I had, and they just showed me like, hey, you can do this. So I understood the importance more as I got older. And I don't think I feel obligation. I think I feel proud that I've created a path for somebody to follow. And hopefully, there's younger coaches that feel like they can accomplish the same dreams that I had, And hopefully I help them feel that they can accomplish those dreams.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I know knowing Candace and knowing the culture at Vanderbilt that that would not be like an issue to overcome and looking for a job. Like, were you ever concerned at least certain schools that it might prevent you from, what you had really deserved and earned?
Maybe I don't know if I prevent is the right word, but I was a little more hesitant with some areas or some, just the landscape of where the schools were. And Nashville, obviously, I didn't have those fears with it being such a large city and a more progressive city. And then when I got on campus, just the overall embrace, and this isn't the right word, but just how everyone embraced Mark and would ask me about Mark, and they invited him down for dinner. And it just became so normal right away through the process that I didn't have to say anything. I didn't have to act like it was not normal. And that really meant a lot to me. And the fact that they really pushed for Mark to be a part of the interview process, some meant a lot to me. So yeah, it was very obvious early on that this culture here at Vanderbilt is incredibly accepting, incredibly diverse, and that was something that meant a lot to us.
I just had an experience with the lacrosse team, women's lacrosse team here, to bring in a guest speaker named Brian Ruby, who's a country music singer-songwriter and a professional baseball player. And he came out a couple years ago and was one of the first. He was the only active pro baseball player that was out at the time. Country music, obviously not the easiest industry to do that in. And he was talking to the team about just the thought process that he went through when he was going to come out publicly, and what a better player he became, after he did. And in his mind, he was concerned about some reaction potentially from teammates, but it turned out to be entirely positive, and people that he suspected might be the most resistant actually turned out to be quite supportive. I was curious about your own process, when that was in your career as a volleyball player, and what was on your mind and how it actually went.
Yeah, I answered this question for an interview a couple weeks ago, but I had come out to a couple friends, very close friends, but I didn't come out in college because of my teammates and just because of the locker room atmosphere. And that was a while ago, and I wouldn't have had any pushback now looking back. But at the time, I didn't know that, and I had a lot of fears around it. But I had a close friend who went through a pretty serious health issue. He's good now and doing great. But that kind of just opened my eyes, and I went back home to be with him through the diagnosis. And I finally kind of realized, like, hey, what you being gay is not a problem. It's not a health issue. It doesn't hold you back, and you're making it a bigger deal in your mind than it probably is to everybody else. So I almost needed a semi tragedy to kind of come to terms with my own sexuality. But that is when I came out to my parents and started coming out to a lot more friends and family and things like that. And I'll say I've never regretted it for a day in my life. I've never heard of anybody who's come out and has regretted it for a day in their life. And I do think that it allowed me to just kind of take a big exhale and stop being worried about what other people were thinking about me and truly be myself, and also work harder to achieve my goals. I had kind of less baggage so I could go achieve my goals. And I do think it's made me a better volleyball coach. I think it's made me a much better leader of people because I've become more aware of people's differences and maybe what they're going through. But yeah, like I said, I can't emphasize that enough. I've never regretted it a day in my life.
Hmm. That's terrific. All right, so there's a couple years before this team takes the court. What can people in Nashville, Vanderbilt community do to support the women's volleyball program at this stage?
Yeah, that's also a great question, and I'm still figuring that out right now. Well, I'll put in a shameless plug. There is an area you can donate on our website, so that would be the first thing if you'd like to donate. We obviously have a lot to buy in the next couple of years, and a lot to build and things like that. But honestly, just spreading the word about Vanderbilt volleyball, and I have really big dreams for that first match that we host in 2025. I'm not going to share them now because I want some of them to be surprises, but we have very, very big hopes and dreams for that first match to make it a really big event. And Vanderbilt has been so great about, already promoting the program. And I apologize to everyone for the social media blitz of only me so far, because I feel like you can't avoid me right now, even if you want to. We don't have a lot to sell besides me right now that you can see. So I will, I'll take it, I guess. But yeah, just spreading the word, and we will have more information as things transpire. But yeah, we want to make sure that people understand that this is a program that's added not out of necessity. This is a program that was added to be successful, and we have really high hopes for this program. And you might as well jump on the bandwagon from year zero. So in year 5 to 10, when we're succeeding, you don't look like me as with the Bengals. So yeah, just starting to already get excited about is really the best thing you can do.
That's right. You can be the first person on the bandwagon, right?
Yes, yes.
So, and then just a couple of last questions here, but you mentioned that there will be women that you're recruiting arriving on campus next year. So just curious about roster construction. So you'll have people redshirting, then you'll have what, incoming freshmen that first year the program begins, graduate transfer or transfer portal. How do you put the first team together?
Yeah, that was also part of the planning process that I kind of explained in the interview. I wanted to make sure that they had a really good idea of how I plan to kind of form our roster. I will say initially we planned on bringing in like 3 to 4 2024s, so they'd be juniors in high school right now. And that class would redshirt. But really the only difference would be that first semester because volleyball is a fall sport. So they'd redshirt that fall, and then the spring, every volleyball player in the country is just training and playing exhibition matches, which is what we'll do. But since we've gotten the job and since we've started reaching out to some recruits, we've had a much higher level interest from that 2024 class than I expected. So I think it'll be maybe 5, 6, 7 players in that first class now. And our main priority for that class, honestly, this is not just coach speak, is to get high character players. They're the people that are literally going to build our culture. And the next group that comes in is going to follow everything they do. So we need to make sure that we have really top, obviously, students. You don't come here if you're not top athletes, but most importantly, top people in that first class. The following year, so this will be into spring of 2025, we'll likely bring in a transfer or two and just kind of trying to figure out the landscape of the transfer portal and Vanderbilt with us being such a high academic institution. But yes, we hope to bring in some so we have some experience on that first team. And then the summer of 2025, we'll bring in a really large freshman class to complement that group that's already there. We also will get to go on a foreign trip that summer to get some more time under our belts as a group, just to gel and also play some matches. And then, yeah, like I said, fall 2025 first match. Hopefully we'll be here right on campus. And yeah, already got a lot of ideas for that.
And you've mentioned, 5, 10 years down the road, it sounds like you have a very long-term plan. And I could just imagine sitting there as a young coach, your first job, starting a new program, like thinking ahead, 20, 30 years, like you have a potential to be so associated with this sport at Vanderbilt and to, in your dreams, think about starting it and then, winning championships in the decades to come. Do you allow yourself to think ahead like that with those types of visions in your head?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't like moving, first of all. So I don't love change. I'm a very loyal person. Obviously, I was at Kentucky for 11 years. I'm really big on seeing things through. This is a job, and I knew that taking it, that could be a destination job. And what I mean by that is you can get here and stay here forever. There's just so much to offer within the community, within the university. And then just, again, the department that I get to work for the last 3 weeks to a month has been remarkable. And yeah, I'm thinking about this as my final job. And I think if you go about it any other way, then you're not committing everything you have to it. And that's what I plan to do.
All right. Well, Anders, thank you. I'm so excited about this program. It's going to be great to support it and to see it, come to fruition. Great to talk to another person from Wisconsin, even if you grew up a Twins and a Vikings fan, and looking forward to seeing you around the hallways. Thank you so much, Anders.
Thanks, Andrew. I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care. Have a good day.